Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to call this meeting to order. On Remembrance Day, we honor soldiers and members of our armed forces who have served our nation. I'd like for everyone to stand if you're able to. We're going to have a minute of silence followed by our national anthem. True patriot love in all of us commend. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. This meeting is being aired on public television and are streamed live and may be taped for later public broadcast or webcast. Your name is part of the public record and will be included in the minutes of this meeting. To avoid disruptions during our meeting, we'd appreciate if members of the audience would please turn off or mute your cell phones or other personal digital devices. Orangeville Town Council welcomes and encourages members of the public to comment on matters of interest to them. However, delegates are cautioned that derogatory or inappropriate remarks may constitute slander and could potentially lead to legal action against them. If such comments are made, the delegate will not be permitted to continue speaking, and the comments will not be recorded in the minutes of the meeting. May I have a motion to approve this agenda? Councillor Peters, seconded by Councillor Post. All in favor? Any disclosures of direct or indirect pecuniary interest? Seeing none. May I have a motion to adopt the minutes of a previous meeting, November the 4th? Councillor Andrews, Deputy Mayor McIntosh, all in favor? I'm sorry. Madam Clerk.
Mr. Mayor, I just had to note one correction on page 3 of the minutes under the Rise and Report. There is a part where it's noted as carried, but there was no vote. Just the information was given in open, but there was no vote. So we've just made that correction of taking the carried out for your information.
Okay, correction to the previous agenda. All right, so with that correction, all in favor? Thank you. Okay, moving on, we have no presentations or petitions tonight. And we have a staff report, and this is from our CAO regarding recommendation for our policing services. Mr. Brennan.
Your Worship, thank you. And through you and members of council, I'm here tonight to present my recommendations for policing services for the town of Orangeville. The presentation itself should be taken in conjunction with the staff report that was put in, CAO 219-011, dated November 11, 2019, on today's agenda. During the presentation, we'll take a quick overview. We'll look at the background, a summary of key findings from the consultant's report, some considerations I would like Town Council to look at, general comments, and to my recommendation. The background itself, this council passed a resolution back in December of 2018 requesting a costing proposal from the OPP. The last costing proposal was presented to council back in 2017. Throughout the process, as you will see, this council has been trying to be very open with the public, providing as many opportunities as we can for the public to speak, to listen to the presentations from OPS, our Orangeville Police Services, also from the OPP. The OPP also presented their contract. They went over the billing model. They presented on June 10th their contract proposal for the town of Orangeville. The OPS presented on September 9th. The OPP presented on September 10th. The public had an opportunity to ask questions of each organization during that time. We had a panel of mayors from Brockville, Caledon, and Pembroke, each one who rejected an OPP costing, one that accepted and transitioned to the OPP, and the other being Caledon, that has been policed by OPP for a number of years through the region of Peel. And finally, on November 4th, Polmax Consulting presented their study and findings to this council. When we look at the summary of the consultant's findings, we are going to focus on a few things. One would be response times, level of service, police staffing levels, police service boards, cost, and projected savings. Response times. The consultant looked at the current response times of OPS, trying to determine if we transition to OPP, would there be a deterioration of such response times? No evidence or indication was found to support such. The consultant concluded that the OPP response times within the town will be similar or better than at present. Levels of service. Again, evaluation of base services, calls for service, and cost potential for potential enhancements was conducted by the consultant. A review of existing and projected staffing levels and requirements was also conducted. The consultant concluded evidence indicates that the OPP would be able to continue to provide the same level of service at a significantly reduced cost to the town. Police staffing levels. During the transition period, the OPP will provide a greater number of officers in Orangeville compared to the OPS current staffing levels. There is no indication that after the transition period, the number of OPP officers will decline below the current number of officers currently experienced in the town. So there's no indication that there will be a decrease, but we must respect the fact that the OPP, depending on the amount of work and policing in our municipality, has the right to lower the number of officers. Police service boards. From the consultant, legislation specifies core functions of community policing and comparative responsibilities of a local police service board and that of an OPP detachment boards. Responsibilities of each entity are comparable, and whether policed by a local police service or the OPP, municipalities have a duty to ensure continued oversight of police service boards. This is what the consultant found. I think we all realize there is a difference between a municipal board and an OPP detachment board, in that in some areas of oversight or management, the hiring of a chief of police, the deputy chief, disciplinary matters, human resources matters, negotiations are all done at a local police services board. In such, those transition to OPP or detachment board, all of that work is done by the OPP staff. Cost. The consultant reviewed the current OPS approved budget from 2019, as well as their new proposed budget for 2020. They completed the OPP billing model to project the cost of policing services for both the transition contract and the period beyond, the period that we would then fall under the new billing model for OPP. The consultant took into consideration enhancements that may be necessary, completed an estimate for transition costs. I will also add here, as you probably recall from the consultant's presentation, just to be an added side of caution or be more conservative, the consultant also took both budgets from the OPS, and we put an additional, or the consultant put an additional 3% on each one of the projections. So 3% year over year to project what may look like the worst case scenario for OPP costing in the future. If you look at year one transition, the consultant found that looking at the OPP proposal, including revenues, severances, initial costs, station changes, records management, he estimated approximately $9.563 million. If you look at part year of the Orangeville Police Services, the consultant estimated that that would be $6.134 million. So a total for a first year of policing under the OPP/OPS would be approximately $15.968 million. So from the $15.698 million, if you take away the normal OPS budget of $8.527 million, you're left with a net difference of $7.17 million. So what the consultant is saying, the year that you transition, your transition cost is going to cost you approximately an additional $7.17 million. I would like to add here to council is that council should recognize that this is a one-time cost, so it doesn't roll year over year. It's a one-time cost. The town would have to come up with that money and pay it back. But council should recognize that this one-time cost could increase or could decrease if severances and payouts are higher or lower than estimated. And the only reason why I want to put that in is that it is a very complicated scenario. The police services, Orangeville Police Services contract expires at the end of this year. One could end up in arbitration, as the case may be, for such severances and disbandment. So we should recognize that although it's a very conservative estimate that our consultant has put there, conservative in protecting us and not estimating that it would be higher, but again, we should recognize that it could be a bit higher or lower, but again, I stress it's a one-time cost. If we look at this graph, just to show you, this is projected savings based on scenario 1, which is the approved OPS budget. Again, if you follow my pointer, you will see here, this is the 7.17 million. As the consultant reported, after year 2024, the 7.1 million would be paid back, and you would have actually a net savings of approximately 1.687 million. And if you projected those savings over the long term out to year 2036, you're looking at approximately $61 million savings. If we looked at the worst case scenario, which again, the first year in this case would be the proposed budget from OPS, and a 3% added annually increase to the OPP projected numbers, you would look at a cost, first-time transition cost of approximately $7.265 million, being paid back by year 2024 with a surplus or savings of $1.728 million, and a projected long-term savings in the 2036 of approximately $53 million. Again, just a quick way of looking at, from the original approved budget, 7.17. Once you get over to here, actually, once you get into the year 2021, 22, and 23, you're still seeing savings compared to the present OPS budget. In year 2024, your transition cost of $7.1 million would be paid back in full, in addition to a $1.687 million surplus or savings. Under the new billing model, if you look at from years 2024 to 2036, the town would recognize from these numbers an average of $4.66 million savings annually. That equates to approximately 13% of the town's present annual tax levy. We had some discussions on how would we pay for this. We don't have the money, it's a cost. And it is correct that if we're going to borrow money in a traditional sense from a financial institution, it will cost us. However, town staff are proposing here that there are probably two ways of financing this transition cost up to $7.1 million. Internal borrowing against our reserves. We have approximately $16 million in discretionary reserves. We could borrow against that. We would have no interest, no set terms to pay it back. However, I would strongly encourage council, if we did do it this way, we should try to pay back our reserves within that 5-year time frame, or 2024. If we went to the traditional approach of external financing from a financial institution, we've been quoted at 2.8% over a 5-year term, and that would cost the town an additional $563,628. As we talk about fiscal responsibility, I just want to bring council's considerations to a number of municipal fiscal climate, and some things to consider. And this is not just Orangeville, it's other locations as well and other municipalities. We've seen a lot of change in the last number of months from both our federal and provincial governments. And some of that change, we really don't know how it's impacting us at this stage yet. The true cost and the true impact on us has not been recognized to date. Just a few things I wanted to point out. The Ontario Community Infrastructure Fund, the OCIF, which we've been happily receiving funds over the last number of years, based on a formula base, guaranteed money coming to the municipality. We've been advised that that program will end in 2020. We are not certain what's going to replace it, if it's going to be a formula-based funding or if it's going to be a grant application or something of another sort. We've also seen current and proposed changes in Bill 108, more homes, more choices. We have to look at things such as the Development Charges Act and the Planning Act, what has been changed and changing. Expected impacts to collecting of soft services, i.e. Parks, recreation, library services, and such, being moved into the Planning Act potentially. Changes to when and how development charges can be collected. There may be changes coming to our planning cycles of approvals from the planning process, which again may put either hardship or demands, financial demands on municipalities. It may mean more staff in order to turn over these approvals faster. Increased exemptions will likely result in increased costs to taxpayers vis-a-vis growth-related costs. We also have changes coming in our asset management plan. Back in 2016, our consultant recognized and presented to council that our infrastructure gap right now is approximately $5.35 million. Council's made some moves to close that gap over recent years, but the gap still remains. There will be increased requirements through the asset management plans and deadlines in 2021 and 23, meeting new requirements of identifying your assets, identifying the level of services, and having a review of the plan every 5 years, and actually looking at the plan every year. So the province is basically telling us that we own assets, make sure that you are properly funding them and repairing them and putting the money towards them and properly managing them. There's other issues from provincial regulations. We've got climate change, adaptation to green initiatives. We're looking at the storms that we've seen, the severity of some of our storms. It's going to cost municipalities if we want to build and we want to protect our environment. Carbon footprint, if we want to reduce, again, I think it's going to cost us money. I do want to stress to Council, regardless who's providing policing in our municipality, regardless if it's OPS or Orangeville Police Services or OPP or other, those future fiscal concerns are still going to face you. So in the report, finally, the consultant concluded that evidence leads us to conclude that accepting the OPP's proposal will enable the town to experience essentially the same level of policing as at present, at a savings of approximately $58 million based on a period of 2020 to 2036. The CAO finds no reason to disagree with the consultant's conclusion. A few general comments before I get into the recommendation. And I want to stress that the OPS is a capable and professional police service. The CAO's recommendations are not intended to reflect negatively on the OPS or any of its members. The OPP is also a capable and professional police service that provides policing services to approximately 325 of the 444 municipalities, both rural and urban policing. Their integrated model of policing is proven to be an effective model. My recommendations, the CAO's recommendations, is based on the outcomes of the review process, including all the steps that this council has taken to get information on both services. It's based on the review process, including the findings of the consultant's report, and focuses on recommending the best option for the town, considering fiscal responsibility, levels of policing service, and overall impact on our community now and in the future. CAO recommends that Council of the Corporation of Town of Orangeville accept the Ontario Provincial Police Costing Proposal for Municipal Policing presented to Council on June 10, 2019. That concludes my presentation, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Brennan. Councillor Sherwood.
Yes, Your Worship, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Brennan, for your presentation, or your presentation with regard to this. The CAO is recommending this for consideration tonight, and we know that we have to make this vote by December 10th. So tonight, pretty much, this process is coming to a conclusion. We have gone through several months of exercises to get to this point. Most recently, we have had several public inputs, Q&As. I think to further delay could make to further delay the vote of December and wait till December 10th, when we are entering into the budget discussion by November 25th, ultimately has an effect on this process. I think we need to focus on the budget, and it doesn't make sense to wait and vote by December 10th after multiple budget discussions. So wrapping up tonight, I don't think we need to vote tonight. However, I've stated that in 2 weeks, the budget begins November 25th. Therefore, I would like to put forward a motion to defer the voting on this report and the CAO's recommendation for a vote on November 25th.
Okay. Do we have a seconder?
I would like to second that.
Okay. So we have a motion on the floor to defer the vote until November 25th. I'll call the vote. All in favor? Opposed? Vote passes. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to move on to question period now. As per our procedural bylaw, those who wish to speak have 3 minutes. Tonight, we're welcoming anybody to ask questions or make comment. There's a lot of people in the gallery tonight, so we're going to try and keep to this 3 minutes. Anybody like to comment or ask a question? Please step up. Give your name and where you live, please.
Can you all hear me clearly?
Yes?
Thank you. We thank you, Orangeville Council, for giving us the opportunity.
Ma'am, your name and where you live?
Opportunity to express our views. We're Jerry and Lynn Hiffner. We reside at 145 Parkview Drive. As residents of Orangeville for 45 years, we have recognized the value of Orangeville Police Services within our community. We have raised our family here, have been involved in many activities, including Cubs, Scouts, Brownies, Girl Guides, gymnastics, bowling, tennis, and have interacted with OPS officers, many who have also been residents of this community and have also raised their families in our town. We recognize the value of our local police force being visible and actively participating in this community in events throughout the year involving sports, bike rodeos, charity fundraisers, and other activities. In July, we voiced our opinions by contacting the town councillors and the mayor via email as we began to realize the serious issues of OPS versus OPP. We received responses from 3 council members. We have attended all the public invited council sessions to gather more information on the 2 law enforcement agencies and the assessment of pros and cons to our community. Throughout all these sessions and the feedback of mayors from various communities, we realized that the prime focus of the Mayor of Orangeville is cost savings. We, as taxpayers, are fully aware that any cost savings will not be refunded or our property taxes reduced. A lot of people that we have spoken to are expecting lower town taxes, but this is highly unlikely whether OPS or OPP police Orangeville. Therefore, we feel that the value of our local police force was not and could not be compared in monetary terms. The estimated future cost of policing in Orangeville over the 16 years proposed increases are confusing due to the uncertainty of the numbers presented. The term that was introduced at one of the sessions by a concerned citizen, quote, apples to apples comparison, reflects the importance of having a local police force within our community. Because we are in close proximity to the city of Brampton and recognize that our crime rate has increased as more homeowners relocate to Orangeville, comparing us to other communities that are not as close to major cities was not a fair evaluation of our situation. We realize that with time, to have quality education, health services, and police services will require greater financial commitment. Yes, we are invested in our town and paying for our police services, knowing through our involvement with them, past, present, and future, that keeping the current policing services are necessary for our peace of mind with regard to response times and the presence of officers on our streets, which are two of our main priorities. Knowing that many of the OPS officers live here, spend their earnings here, and are involved in all areas of our town's sports events, community events, speaks for what this town has always maintained in a relationship with our local law enforcement. We also know that OPP officers are often rotated or moved elsewhere, so they may or may not become dedicated to the town other than for their jobs. We are fully convinced that the OPS can continue providing policing in Orangeville at a reasonable cost to the taxpayer. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir. State your name and
My name is Murray Berger, and I've been a resident of the town of Orangeville for just over 53 years. I come here before you tonight to make a plea to you. Keep Orangeville Police. They have served, I was, most of you know, I was a member of Orangeville Police years ago. I moved to this town and have been a resident here for 53 years. I've always had the greatest respect for police. Probably one of the reasons is I don't get in trouble, and the other one being I used to be a police officer. That being said, right now, and looking back over the years, we have in Orangeville probably, and not probably, we do have the best chief, the best deputy chief, and the best officers that we will ever have in this municipality. I urge the mayor and council to please consider that fact and vote for Orangeville Police. The deputy and the chief of police are just wonderful people. We can't ask for any more than that. Are we going to get that with OPP? I don't know. I can't answer that neither. I have talked to the mayor and deputy mayor and maybe one of the other councilors, I don't know. Not necessarily concerning this. I go out for coffee with the deputy mayor, and I've been to lunch with the mayor. So I have respect for everyone here. So I'm going to close up because there's been a lot said by the previous person that was here that some of the stuff I was going to say. I'm going to close up with saying, keep Orangeville Police. You can't go wrong by doing that. Thank you.
thank you, sir. Your name for the record, sir.
My name is Frank Gray. I live in Mona Township, but I pay taxes in the town of Orangeville at 229 Broadway. What I'd like to say here is that much of the presentation that I'm about to make here has already been covered by CAO Ed Branham. Not knowing what he was going to speak about, I went ahead and made my presentation. So a lot of this information I'm about to speak on is already been covered by CAO Ed Brennan. Here we are once again discussing the pros and cons of keeping our Orangeville Police Force or changing to Ontario Provincial Police. The Orangeville Council of 2014 to 2018 were not supportive of Ed Brennan's and the Treasury report recommending the change to Ontario Provincial Police with substantial savings. Supporters of Orangeville Police with their lawn signs have given the impression that we should stay the course with our present police service. The two different studies, one by the town and one by POMAX, have somewhat the same conclusions, which is sizable savings. Some fears about making the change to OPP where residents wouldn't have the same level of service, the response time would not be adequate, and not as many officers as the police force provide us with now. Also, we could lose control that we have with the Orangeville Police and the Police Commission. All of these concerns, anyone that's paid any attention to the report by Ed Brennan and has read the report over, all of these concerns have been dealt with in the POMAX report. The POMAX report indicates by changing to the OPP a total of savings of $58,000 by the year 2036. Even if we don't project this amount, the taxpayers will have a savings of $1,670,000 by the year 2022. I think these are the same figures that Ed Brandon come up with. And a savings of $4,139,000 by the year 2025. The necessary expenses to change to OPP include new equipment, severance costs to the Orangeville police officers who don't make the switch will amount to there's some other costs in there that I haven't made note of, but the total costs amount to $7,170,000 in the first year. This amount will be paid back by year 2024. So as Ed Brennan has already mentioned, we are in a positive flow, cash flow, by the year 2024. We don't need to be concerned about the 58 million that's way out there. We're going to start making a change of savings by the year 2024. There should not be a need to take out a special loan for the $7,170,000 startup costs, as this money can be loaned from some reserves that have accumulated in other departments, as Ed has already mentioned. And as I said, will be paid back by the year 2024. The amount budgeted for the switch to OPP covered 10 to 12 officers not making the switch. This was part of the money put into the $7 million of costs of the first year, and they have estimated 10 to 12 officers not making the switch to the OPP, which I think is a larger number than will make the change. I think there'll be less people than 10 to 12 officers that would make the change. Some reports indicate Orangeville has the highest property taxes of any municipality around. Our continuous property tax increases need to get under control. Many residents are feeling pushed to the limit with costs rising in all areas. Most council members, if not all, pledged to come to grips with the town property taxes when they were running for council. Here is an opportunity to fill that pledge. Huge savings can be made by changing our police service to the Ontario Provincial Police. There will be some loss of jobs, but most officers will see the switch to OPP as an opportunity for more advancement with the OPP. There's a much bigger organization in police, and they will have more opportunity for advancement. There aren't too many job opportunities that have guarantees today, and that's the world we live in. In Pembroke, for example, 26 out of 28 officers made the change. Most people I speak with support saving money when the opportunity arises. I know the majority of taxpayers fall into this category, but they are also the silent majority. They don't speak up, they don't want to rock the boat. I am speaking for them, and I am part of that group. Nobody wants to rock the boat. The Orangeville Police Force is well liked by the community, and we don't like to rock the boat. Some warnings here that I make note of. Present council could be looking at a new fire hall, which could cost between $6 to $7 to $8 million. Our local newspapers reported another possible $6 to $8 million cost to taxpayers on top of a federal and provincial grant for changes to the Alder Street Arena. Plus, council has to deal with the costly railroad situation. We are also carrying the cost of land purchase for a new Humber College that never took place. As I've mentioned here, council has a lot on their plate to think about, and it's very, very serious. We've got to take a good look at this opportunity here. Last year, our fire department took on an additional 8 full-time fires that the previous council, 2014 to 2018, put in place. Our provincial government is trimming their budget, and it's very possible, and as well as the federal government, Orangeville could suffer the loss of some grants. We need to consider all the information at our disposal, and we
Mr.
must
Gray?
take action
Mr.
to
Gray?
stop the bleeding.
I give you one more minute, sir?
I'm
Please.
finished.
Thank you.
Just, we need to consider all the information at our disposal, and we must take action to stop the bleeding and bring in some realistic planning for the taxpayers. Thanks for the opportunity for addressing council. I take this job very seriously, and I know you people are too. You've got some huge a job at your possession there to make this thing work. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Hello, Connor Beeman, Morgandale Crescent. I would like to bring up here a petition in favor of the Orangeville Police Service, signed by 460 Orangeville residents and 41 non-residents. So I'd like to present to you, to the Orangeville Council, the petition.
Thank you, Connor. We'll receive that. Yes, sir.
Good evening. My
Good
name is
evening.
Mike. My name is Mike Chapman. I live on Forest Park Road in Orangeville, and I'm here to support the Orangeville Police Force. The confusion I see on community pages is that they still don't understand the OPP billing service. And actually, Councillor Sherwood helped me understand that last week when we talked about calls for service based on the 21,000 that the OPS talked about and the 7,000 that the consultant is talking about. We know that the 10,400 units, that households that are in Orangeville pay the minimum, the basic service, which is about $2.1 million. But the rest of it, the bulk of what the OPP makes, how they earn their money, is on charging for calls for service. So if council will allow, I do have a question that I would like to ask the consultant.
Is Mr. Hambides here?
Right there.
He is. Very, very good, sir.
So good evening. So you've marked down 7,000 calls on average that you've used for your calculations. However, the OPS show 20 to 21,000 calls, which shows about a difference about 13 to 14,000 calls that you call events. Have you looked at those events? Have you categorized them, and have you seen what kind of events they are?
Every one of them. Can you hear me? Yes? Every one of them. Try this one. Excuse me for a minute. Okay, yeah, that's better. Yeah, every one of them. For the years 2015 through to 2018 and part year 2019.
All 35,000 of those types.
That's correct.
Okay.
Yeah,
And
and 83 to 87 to 93 categories. Okay, so I can tell you, sorry, you go ahead and ask the question. I was going to, okay.
I'm interested to see how you categorize them, what kind of calls they were, what kind of events that they were.
I think there's still a misunderstanding of the billing model because the 20,000 some calls which the OPS present are accurate. And those are made up of all sorts of events. So they're patrol events and they're actual criminal events. But the OPP billing system is based on criminal events only, which are the 7,000 odd criminal events. They do not take into account all of them because some of those other, let's say 13,000 incidents are part of normal patrol, and that's part of the base cost. The 7,000 odd calls, which, by the way, somebody previously said that the crime rate has been going up in Orangeville. It's been going down for the last 3 years, okay? Interesting to know where some of these facts come from. So the 7,000 events are the ones that are included in billing models, not the ones that are They're the reactive events. If you recall before, we said if somebody picks up the phone and calls and says, I need help, or they report a drunk driver or something like that, those are the incidents that are taken into account in the billing model.
Well, I was looking at lost properties, things like that, and I saw that, and I was looking through all the 500 and over 500 items that the OPP can bill for, and when I'm looking at those 13,000 calls, I mean, the OPS, because they don't have to bill per call, I think a lot of calls are I think they could be charged under the OPP billing model. I am also looking at the calls, the calculations that you used last week for 7,000, but I'm looking at the original report, and on page 6, under the statistical summary, you show an average of almost 10,000 calls that you use for your calculations. So there's a 40% difference between what you show here and what you show here. So to me, there's a lot of incongruities that are in there, based on the 7,000 you showed last week, the 10,000 that's in here, and the capacity for I think a lot of those calls that the OPS shows that are what they might call community service calls. I think a lot of them have the potential for being billed, and I really believe that there's right now it's $3 million for those calls. I think that those numbers of calls could be double that. Because when you look at other places, the calls that they're being charged, the OP. Well, based on other communities and how much they're being,
Which communities, Mr. Chapman?
Well, things like Muskoka, which is being billed for almost 14,000 incidences, and they're smaller than we are. So when you look at those ones, the way the OPS bills, the way they handle those events aren't events. They're contacts with our citizens. And there's a lot of things that I believe that the OPS doesn't charge for that eventually the OPP will charge for. And then I think that the $3 million that we're going to pay is going to be double. It's going to be double that if you use a $13,000 for $14,000 of the $21,000. And I believe that you're going to be at $8 million or $8.1 million, and that we will save no money over time. And 4 years from now, what they're going to do, what the OPP is going to do, is they're going to take all those calls, they're going to match them up, they're going to look at them, they're going to match them up with the 500 bills, the 500 menus that they can build them with, and they're going to come up with a much larger bill than the original ones here.
Thank you, Mr. Chapman.
Thank you.
Stephanie Monforts, I live in Orangeville as well.
Excuse me, Stephanie.
Yep.
Mr. Hambides, did you want to make a comment, sir?
Yes, except I'm not really sure how to comment because I respect what the former speaker had to say, but it's fundamentally wrong. You have to understand how the billing model works. The base service, response calls, and only if you work within the rules of the billing model do you come up with the right numbers. And the numbers, as much as, there could be beliefs, unfortunately was fundamentally wrong. And sorry, one more thing. If you read the report carefully, the report lays out the differences between each of those calls. And some of the numbers were not ours, they were the OPS. I believe the OPS numbers, I think they're right, the traffic stops, community services, and so on. But you have to really be cautious as to how you look at the numbers and apply them.
Thank you.
you.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry, in regards to that question, maybe I just want to add or continue it on if you don't mind. Is it possible, because again, municipalities turn around and classify their calls differently, and OPP has a different classification of calls. Is it quite possible that it's been misrepresented the way that OPS actually represents their calls and the way that OPP do, that they don't match?
Highly unlikely. About the only way that could happen, since the numbers that the OPP used and we used were the numbers reported by the Orangeville Police Service. and it's in their niche, their record management system, and there also are uniform crime reporting methodologies. So it's based on those things, so it's, I mean, you never say anything's impossible, but I'm pretty positive. Like, I wouldn't say 110%, this isn't a sport, but, 99% is correct.
I have some paperwork that I'd like to present to council. It's some analysis that actually I spent the weekend doing in regards to the report, and a question that I'd asked you last week. And I can give you one of those, sir, if you'd like to accept it. So last week I had brought up a question of, you had said that there was 3% baked into the OPP costing year over year. And I took a look, the first report, or the top portion of the report that didn't take into OPS's forecasted numbers, the top portion actually didn't have 3%. It was like 2.5%, like I said, from 2025 to 2030. And then from 2030, you forecast OPP at less than 1%. Also, in the other one that you took on OPS's forecast, I noticed that we had the 3%, but it seems to be from 3031 to 3034, it dropped down 1% for policing forecast on OPP year over year. With that said, if you take a look at the report, OPS's forecast had some extreme violent swings year over year. Violent swings in costing year over year. So 1 year the influx or the change year over year would be 4% or 5. And then some other years were like less than 6.6%. So there's some huge variations. And when the variations happened, it happened to put them into a different threshold of a cost. So put them from a $12 million to a $13 million. So I'd like you to explain to me, you said there was a baked in 3%, but how come that 3% didn't continue on for the entire 16-year forecast, sir? And why was there a difference between OPS and OPP for a forecasted year over year? Because they should have been similar.
The 3% applies to which model?
Applies to your secondary model, the secondary one that had the forecast of OPS's 2020 budget baked in. So it's portion number, proposed OPP budget, page 19 of the ProMax report. It was, if you look at the main page, exhibit 13.
Okay. The 3% was applied to what? Was it applied to the OPS or the OPP?
OPP got the 3%. OPS was, as I said, put into violent swings of like 4%, 3% year over year, and then 0.6% the year after. So there were some huge variations.
Okay. First of all, what you have to understand is this isn't an amortization. The changes aren't static. They're not uniform all the way across. And the reason for that is when you do budgeting, it's not uniform. Things change because of the year, because of capital expenditures and various other things. We took our cue for the OPS. I'll give you a moment. You're thinking about that one?
Yeah. I'm just trying to understand, like I understand an algorithm or a forecasting. You take a back forecast and look at like a 10-year stint of forecast change year over year to give you an algorithm in regards to a forecasting model. I did a lot of forecasting. So if you're looking even at a 5-year, you'd have to, policing needs are going to change, yes, and there's going to be provincial standards or provincial funding that possibly is going to change. But then if you're going to compare the two police departments, they should have a similar, I guess you'd say, year-over-year comparison. Why is OPP so varying difference than OPS and a percentage change year over year?
No, that's not the case at all. First of all, as I said, it's not an amortization. So we don't go, I think you said go back 10 years and then forecast from there. Is that what you said?
You look for market trends when you're doing forecasting, or you look at provincial trends, or you look at economics in order to turn around and figure out a forecast. Again, a 16-year or something, I wouldn't push anything more than a 5.
Yeah.
A 5 is even pushing it, like Todd Taylor had said the other week.
It's very difficult to do with policing or any other type of emergency service to look at the trend from 10 years ago, 10 years forward. Certainly what we can see is what the OPS forecast for their budget to 2023. So 2019, 2020, 21, 22, and 23. So that tells us what the OPS is requesting. There's 2 models of what the OPS requested. They requested their under their approved budget mechanism, and then there was let's call it a change, a different request where they lowered or attempted to lower their budget mechanism for the same period of time. So we utilized both. And so what we're basing it on is what the OPS has said they require. Okay, so it's no modeling, it's actual.
To have those and it's not in the first 3 years that the swings seem to happen, it's in the back half.
Ms. Montfort, you have 1 minute.
Thank you.
I'm getting to that answer, okay? So just, there's the OPS's forecast, not ours, the OPS, and we accepted it as it was. We took a look at the differences year by year and the reason for the differences. Then we started modeling it. And the reason we did that is because some years there were capital expenditures of a certain kind, consoles for the communication system, for example, radio systems, various things like that, that don't repeat. So we didn't put increases in for those sort of things. There's also changes in what we anticipate the settlements and salaries and wages and benefits. Some of them we saw at a really high rate in the forecast, in the models and the requests that the OPS did. We didn't carry those high rates on. We dropped them because we thought it just doesn't seem reasonable to put these kind of increases in across a 16-year period. In addition to that, that lowers the anticipated cost of the OPS in comparison to the OPP. It doesn't raise it, it lowers it. So we did that all the way across. When you get to year 4 with the OPP, there is no method of doing that. You don't anticipate that there's going to be some changes. They have a model. It's a constant billing model. There's a couple of variances in that, okay? There's only a couple of variances in that. So, you know, one variance is that if the OPP gets salary increases, those have to be included. So we put 3% in there across the board for salary increases. We did. You know, I mean, I accept that you're shaking your head, but we did. Okay, my answer. The second thing is that we increased the base service cost 0.5%. Even though base service cost has been decreasing, we increased it 0.5% compound across the 16 years. Sorry, that'd be 13 years. We also increased the cost for service. Even though cost for service hasn't been increasing that greatly, we increased it. So, in fact, we lowered the possibility of the cost of the OPS and increased the possibility of the cost of the OPP to do the comparison. And, you know, it's very difficult for you to bring these, I appreciate you bringing them up, and I wouldn't put aside sitting down with you and going through every step. However, it's very difficult to answer specific questions about a certain line because I'm not sure you're applying them to the right ones.
And like I
Yeah.
said, in OPP, the back half is less than 1%.
And it should be. You can't do it that way. So that's explanation. It's not amortized.
But it still shouldn't be a growth rate. There should be a growth in year 30, 31, 32, 33, 34.
Why?
Because they've been guaranteed a 2.15% increase year over year.
We've increased it by 3%.
You did in the first half, but you don't on the back half.
Well, okay, so we disagree.
Okay, thank you.
Tina Hinsberger, resident in Orangeville. I've lost a lot of sleep over this issue, and I am hoping that all of you have as well. This is a really important issue. It's not one to be taken lightly. If council does decide to move forward with OPP, we can't go back. It would be too cost prohibitive to go back. I've had the opportunity to review the report of the consultant. I'm still very concerned that the consultant agreed to look 16 years into the future, and at best feel that it's guesswork past the first 3 years. He had stated that there was no guarantee that there won't be a sudden spike in costs after the 3 years transition. He had stated that last week when he provided his report. Ms. Davis of the OPP was not prepared to provide a quote beyond 3 years. She stated OPP would gather data over the course of that 3-year contract to develop a longer-term Orangeville-specific contract with the town. I don't know of any business that would say, you know what, I'll tell you what we're going to pay right now, what we're going to charge you right now, but then after that, we're going to kind of wait and see, and you'll just pay us whatever you want. No business would do that. We don't have a costing after year 3. We have some estimates, we have some guesstimates, but we don't have a costing. Mayor Baker of Brockville advised that his town pushed for a very specific made-in Brockville costing and discovered that OPP cost more. When I spoke with him privately, he told me that it took him 2 months of pushing before he got that made-in Brockville costing. I see nothing in the consultant report speaking of a made-in Orangeville costing, with making us look more like apples and apples. I see some comparisons, but it's not, to me, it's not the same as Orangeville Police. What I do see is that much of the report seems to be speaking in generalities. It talks about the role of the OPP, talks how to disassemble a solid working municipal force. There's no information as to where all of the consultants' information came from. I would have expected there to be a list of who he contacted, what the references were that he referred to. There's a couple of, because I've attended all of these meetings, you know, it seems that some of the information may have been pulled from some of the previous meetings, but aside from that, there's no detail with respect to where this information all came
Mr.
came
Hambides,
from.
would you like to comment on where the data came from, sir?
Yes, I would. I wonder if you could say it again, though. What are you talking about, the data we have in there?
There's nothing to indicate where you were getting all of your information from.
What information in particular?
The entire information in the
Well, I'm
in the
trying to-
report.
Give me one example then.
With respect to the amounts that you were quoting, I just have no sense of whether or not you spoke to OPP, whether you spoke to OPS, whether you spoke to individual constables, where you've gotten all of the information that you've gotten in the report. I would have expected that there would have been some reference sheet indicating this is where this information came from. My concern is that OPP has not provided any information beyond the 3 years. And so to be coming up with these figures going 16 years in advance, you know, where is that coming from?
If you looked in the appendices of the report, there's detailed descriptions of how that billing model is calculated. And actually, step by step, it's relatively straightforward to follow, although there are, you know, I shouldn't say that, it's complex at times. We also, in the presentation last week, which you attended, also demonstrated how we arrived at the cost per call on a per capita basis. We showed how we arrived at the base billing cost. This is from year 4 on. So we've demonstrated all of that. With respect to a list of where we got our information from, it's from fact. I mean, we don't deal in opinion. It's nice to interview people. We appreciate people's opinions. We appreciate what they give us. The Orangeville Police Service was terrific in providing information. At the same time, if we talk to constables, it wouldn't make any difference because it's an opinion, so we deal in fact. So if you can give me another specific point, I'd be pleased to answer it. But from generalities, I think perhaps there's lots of information in there, and read the appendices carefully, and that's where the information is too. Okay, so is there another specific thing we could talk about?
Well, I think I'll just continue speaking because I
You
think
have
we'll
1
have
minute,
to
ma'am.
agree to
1 minute,
disagree.
thank you.
Okay. So what do we know now? The OPS budget for 2019 is 8 million. The OPP transition contract, they're indicating in the first year it's going to be 9.3 million and then 8.1 million for the next 2 years. In fact, the consultant even puts that first year higher at 16 million. Response times, there is no way that there can be a comment on response times from OPP. OPP doesn't keep any response times. OPS, however, have indicated that their response time is anywhere from 2 to 7 minutes. The fire department and the public works would also need to seek another dispatch provider. Currently, the police department receives $85,000 from them annually. Our Orangeville police are ours. They work diligently for our community. OPP belongs to the province. We would need to share Dufferin OPP with other municipalities, and indeed, we would need to share OPP with the province. The province would manage the budget, and we would essentially lose control of our policing to the province. I'm making a plea that we keep our Orangeville Police Service. I would also request that given how important this vote is, that I'm requesting that there be a recorded vote as well, because I think that it's important for our constituents to know where our council stands on this issue. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. There will be a recorded vote, and it'll be on television, ma'am. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Greg Werner. I live at 212 Kensington Place, and I've been a resident of Orangeville for almost 50 years. I'm here tonight to speak against council's choice of OPP. I would like to speak in favor of the OPS. 50 years ago, I chose to move to Orangeville from Weston, Ontario. A lovely little town Weston was, much similar to the Orangeville that I moved into. If you've been reading the papers lately, Weston has changed considerably. It's become a shooting gallery. They used to have their own police force. They got amalgamated with Metro Toronto during the big amalgamations in the late 60s. My wife and I have raised 2 children in this town, and we are very proud to call Orangeville home. But like many homeowners, we always talk about taxes. Are they too high? Are we getting our money's worth? Well, in 2 cases, I think I'm getting my money's worth. One is in fire, the second is in policing. Those are 2 safety nets for any resident in this town and are worth their whatever money we have to pay for it, because tonight is all about where we can save money. Many of you on council ran on that pledge to try to save money. I wouldn't say lowering taxes, but to try to find efficiencies. That's very honorable, a very honorable thing to do, but nigh near impossible to accomplish. Each and every year, those people who supply you services and goods probably raise their costs. Those costs get passed on to the taxpayer, And that may end up as a 1.3%, 2.4% increase across the board somewhere along the line. Those are the realities of life. Several councils in the past have chosen to try to go with zero increase. And like other councils, you people are paying the price of that. When it comes time to pay after zero increase, something's got to go up, and that's the taxes, and you're still paying for it. You're still paying for, with all due respect, Mr. Andrews, for the Humber College fiasco. I should have warned you. Sorry I didn't. I would suggest to all of you, a better platform for you would have been to ensure that tax dollars are spent wisely and that any increases needed are kept to a minimum. That's all you would be asked to do, and it's very simple to do. I've lived through several surveys and recommendations done by councils. Some have resulted in improvements to the town, while others have simply lined the coffers of consulting firms. Last week, we heard about a 16-year costing prediction. And with all due respect, sir, I'd like to know how you do that, considering things increase each year. And if you can do that purposely, you can choose my lottery numbers. And that's not, John, sir, that is not derogatory towards you. It's just, I know numbers jump all over the place. So here we are now with another consultant's recommendation. The nice thing about hiring a consulting firm and giving them the criteria for consultation is chances are you're going to get the answers you're looking for. And when you don't, you change consulting firms. Consulting firms give you, and rightly so, your figures are mind-boggling. These people who have spent time going over them deserve a medal, because it's beyond me and beyond the time that I wish to spend on it. But you go through costing, expenditures, and revenue, the entire mathematical gamut, but something is missing in this report. The report by Promax does not talk about the social impact on the town of Orangeville. And at the risk of being redundant, because other people have talked about it, I will continue on. Most of our current officers live in town, making them taxpayers just like you and me. Our officers contribute to our town in many ways. Some of them are big brothers or big sisters. They may be members of service club, sports team, coaches, etc. I know 2 officers who don't live in town, but who, in my experience, have contributed largely to some of the sports in town, particularly basketball. And I thank them for that. We've listened to the report last week, and you restated it tonight, that in the last 3 years, crime has gone down in Orangeville. Congratulations to all of us, and congratulations to our police department. There may be good reason. Could it be that the OPS members are seen outside their job responsibilities by the public doing all sorts of good in their communities? This often leads to respect for them and the job they do. By being active in the community, it could be that members of OPS are able to catch trouble before it happens. I'm a member of a service club which yearly asks for help with a bike rodeo. Officers show up at schools to carry out inspections and talk with the participants. As well, they are there on the final day, the Saturday, when the cyclists are tested on their ability to safely operate a bike. They are visible to the public, just as they are with the Summer Kids and Cops program. Again, making a positive contribution to the Orangeville population. Is this service available from the OPP? I suspect that this could be similar to buying cable or satellite television. There is a basic package, and then everything else costs more money. At X amount of dollars. You need police officers there on Saturday? We've got some for you. $60 an hour, 4 officers. Thank you very much. Will there be an officer available to this club for future bike rodeos? Will the OPP officer live here, or will he or she be one of the many who spend a year then move on to another community with no vested interest in the community that pays the bill? The big question is, are these people vested in the Orangeville community for the longer term? And should council choose the OPP tonight, how many current officers who have put in many years to the betterment of Orangeville will remain here? Of those who do, how many of them will continue to live in Orangeville? I have a neighbor who has indicated that he might move, should this happen. Not that he would leave the Orangeville Police Services, but that he might move to Erin. So his tax dollar goes to Erin, not to Orangeville. The decision you make this evening is not an easy one. And I ask each one of you to give considerable thought to what is to be gained versus to what is to be lost in this proposal. Because believe me, it's a matter of more than money. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. I'm going to ask for a 5-minute recess right now, if you don't mind. Ladies and gentlemen, okay. Take a bit of a break here. We're going to keep our question and answer period open till 9 o'clock tonight. We have a budget presentation. All of councilors are available via email, telephone. If you have further questions or concerns or comments you wish to share with any of the councilors, they're available to receive your information. But we will call the question and answer period at an end at 9 o'clock. Thank you. Can we have our next speaker, please? Mr. Chapman, I believe.
Mike
Yes,
Chapman
sir.
again, please.
Yes, sir.
A point of clarification, you had mentioned, may I ask?
Of course.
You had mentioned that the OPP only charges for criminal activities. That's what you just said when I was up here previously, correct?
Can I just answer that?
Yes.
The calls for service are based on the criminal activity. There's a certain set of criteria. However, there also is a charge as a base service. So there's two charges.
You mentioned that including in that base service is a variety of different types of calls, correct? Okay.
Yeah, generally patrol things.
Okay, so the issue that I have here is that I had to go look it up again. I have a copy of the municipal code for calls for service classification for the OPP billing model. And a found license, as far as I know, is not a criminal offense. A 911 hang-up is not a criminal offense at this point. There are over 500 items in here that are not criminal offenses, or not, oh, sorry, there will be some involved in there. But there are a whole list of things that aren't criminal offenses that the OPP will bill for. And that's the reason why they can't give us a fourth year costing, is because over the next 3 years, they will take all the 13,000 extra calls that the OPS does that are not included in that 7,000, to be fair. They will take those extra 13,000 calls, they will classify them, they will drill them down, and they will match them up to this list. So there will be billing consequences. So even if half of those calls for service are become billable, our calls for service have gone from 3 million to 5 to 6 million. You take on the 2.1 million for the base service cost. You add on the other costs for, the other items that we bill for equipment, et cetera, and you are at the same cost that we already have for OPS. And 4 years from now, when those costs are the same, you're going to have to sit there and explain to us, because hopefully most of you will want to come back. You'll have to explain to us why those costs are not there.
It's been explained to you tonight, Mr. Chapman, that what you're saying is wrong, right? The consultant has already told you that tonight.
No, sir, because these things are billed. They're able to be billed. A found license plate can be billed. All these things can be billed. So, yes.
He has developed his report based on history of what the OPS has done.
Of criminal, and he
That's
charged
right.
was the criminal activities was the 7,000 that you mentioned, correct? The 7,000 calls you mentioned were criminal activities.
Yeah, I need to look at that you have, but I don't need to look at it now, I have to study it. There are in fact thousands of codes, not 500, there's thousands of them. And there's only a certain set of them that are used in the billing model. The reason,
Sorry, I have to disagree with you because it says OPP billing model here. And all these items on here are accessible to be billed. That's what I'm understanding. That's what we
Okay.
pulled off the OPP's own website. That's
might be-
what's
do you-
confusing. That's what's confusing for
Okay.
me, because I do believe that there's 500 items in here that they can continue to bill from, and the reason they can't give us a fourth year is because they have to collate, they have to look at all those charges, all the things that our police force does. They find a wallet, they find a vulnerable person, they take them home. They go see a noisy neighbor and they get them quiet. None of those are actionable, but they're called community service calls, and you can see that on page 10 of the report. All those can be classified, and even if half of them are, it's going to double our calls for service and will receive no savings. And I think that's very important to understand.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Hello, it's Stephanie Monforts again. I'd just like to make note on record, because the camera's probably on me, that the consultant refused to look at the sheet that I actually handed to him to talk to the numbers, so I just want to make mention of that. Number one. Number two is I want to talk to all of council in regards to that number on the calls. If we actually double the calls, I actually did all the financial analysis, and actually there's a difference of $300,000 if we just double the calls from 7,000 to 14,000. So if we end up losing somewhere, that 7,000 calls ends up being 14,000, there's a difference of 200,000 between OPP and OPS year 4. On top of that, if it ends up being 21,000 calls, because as we grow, we're supposed to grow to 12,000 homes in this neighborhood. If we go up to 21,000 calls, because we're calling 19 to 20 in OPS, that actually comes up to $10 million. So the savings, if you take a look at the spreadsheets that I've provided you, gives you an outlook in regards to that. That's point number one. Point number two, in regards to the $5 million for OPP, in year 4, we talk about apples to apples. There's 42.58 people or officers that were guaranteed from year 0 to 4. And then it drops off and goes into the OPP model. But did anybody look at how much $5 million buys of police officers? I did. It's 29.8 officers. So it will take us till the year 2040 to get up to 42.58 officers again. This is how they get around it. That's why you don't have enough, and there's a model of sharing when they actually get implemented. So I'd like you to be very cautious with how many people, because to lose 12 officers in year 4 could be a detriment to this community. I want you to be very aware of that. Please look at the spreadsheet. Thank you.
Thank you.
Trevor Castiglione, 87 John Street, Orangeville. I'd just like to make a comment. It's a little bit of a long one, but I'd like to thank Ed Brennan for all the hard work he did and the consultant. Unfortunately, I have to disagree with them completely, which is no shock to anyone in this room. To me, this is a complete guesstimate, a huge guesstimate. And I don't know about the rest of you, but myself, I run a business knowing what things are going to cost me, knowing how much I have to figure out for that year. I don't look for 16 years. I look at this year. I know what things cost me. I'm not going to guesstimate and say, oh, 16 years from now, I'm going to save $58 million. Or even better yet, Mr. Mayor, how about you bring your vehicle and I'll repair it? I'll give you a guesstimate. And if it's a lot different, you'll just pay the bill, because that's what we're going to end up doing. We know what we have. We know the service we have. We know the costs we have. We have huge expenses coming. Fire department, many other things, Alder Rec Center, the list goes on and on. There's always more expenses. We know what we have. We have a great service. We know what it's going to cost us. We know exactly what it's going to cost us, with a chief that works very hard at keeping the budget at bare bones while keeping our community safe. At last council meeting, the mayor brought up the Aurelia crime statistics and so on and so forth. So I did a little digging, and I've seen a steady increase from 2014 to 2019 in their crime stats. That's where OPP head office is. That's where they're trained. There's hundreds of officers around that community on a regular basis. I'm sorry, that doesn't give me much safety sense to myself when you have the head office of the OPP and the crime rate constantly going up. When you already have hundreds of officers training and officers all over the community on a regular basis in Aurelia, and you're seeing Aurelia's budget going through the roof, who says ours won't? And who's going to be held accountable when ours goes through the roof? Are you going to pay for it out of your pocket, Mr. Mayor? Because I know I don't want to. I know exactly what OPS cost us. I know what I get for what I'm paying for. OPP, I have no clue. Thanks.
Yeah.
Mr. Mayor? Sir?
Oh, yes, Mr. Habeas.
Could I just make a comment about the references to a 16-year forecast. We didn't do a 16-year forecast. We did a forecast 1 year at a time out to 16 years. You look at the previous year's budget and you look at the forecast for the next year. It's 1 year at a time. And we agree that 16 years out is much more difficult than looking 4 years out or 5 years out, and that's why we did it 1 year at a time. So reference to a 16-year guesstimate, it's 1 year at a time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Council. My name is Noel Ramsey. I'm retired and I live here in Orangeville at 15 Feed Street. Prior to my retirement, I was an operations manager at a large corporation. We focused on growing sales, profitability, customer satisfaction, employee satisfaction, safety, and quality assurance. Whether we're merging with a new partner or splitting off a new business or presenting a proposal to a client, we always went through very thorough and detailed examinations. Now, when we moved to Orangeville, one thing jumped off the page at us, and that was how far our taxes were out of line with how much the policing cost was a factor. In the past, here at Council, I have focused on this cost and the potential savings in the policing environment. I could go over how we pay some of the highest taxes in Ontario, and that 23% of our taxes, 23% of our budget is for policing. But you know that already, and you knew that before the last election. The previous council knew that as well, and they took the town through a police costing exercise during that last term. And although the results showed savings in the millions, they chose the OPS in a vote of 4-3. They were elected to represent us, but in my opinion, the deputy mayor should have been more decisive, but he put the responsibility over to the next council. I quote, "I think having the electorate decide this issue in the 2018 election is the right way to go," end of quote. Now, as I've mentioned before on different visits to council, my wife and I campaigned extensively on behalf of many of you in the 2018 election. We went door to door, covering approximately 500 homes, going back to some up to 3 times when we didn't get an answer at the door. Most notably, we received overwhelming feedback that the previous council was dysfunctional and that our taxes were way too high, and the issue of the high cost of policing should have been dealt with. So as a new council, one of the first things you did was request a new OPP costing, and the vote to do this was unanimous. You engaged an outside consultant to review it, which I believe was very prudent, and I believe, based on my past experiences, the consultant gave it a very thorough and detailed examination. There are millions to be saved, whether you're looking at 16 years or even 5 years. No question about it, change is always difficult. However, to ignore it or to avoid it in this case can have significant adverse consequences that will spill over into the affordability in so many other services. We hope this council will make a clear and decisive decision in 2019, one that represents not only the 38.9% that voted in the election, but all the taxpayers and residents. We hope that this council will manage change proactively instead of being forced into it later in a very disruptive manner that will hurt our residents and the quality of life in our community. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
My name is Shirley Ramsey, and I live at 15 Feed Street here in Orangeville. I have to make a comment in opening that I think council has been very generous in giving some speakers extra time. So I will keep my comments brief. I'll leave a lot of the number stuff to my other half. That is his specialty. I'll speak more from my experience of living in the town. I love living in Orangeville. We are relatively new residents of the town, having moved here in 2015 after living in Toronto for 38 years. One part of living in Toronto that I always appreciated as a mother working and raising our kids was the variety of parks and recreation facilities and programs that were available to us. I was very pleasantly surprised to see that the town of Orangeville published an activity guide very similar in content to Toronto's Parks and Rec Guide. Here I was, a lady well into middle age, who wanted and needed physical activity. Aquafit became one of my physical activities of choice here in town. Orangeville offers Aquafit classes at different times of many weekdays to suit people's schedules and has been a godsend to my health and social life in the town. The walking trails and parks are also well used by us. The library also. I have to say thank you. I think of all the parents in town raising their families, seniors like myself, and everyone in between who need these facilities and the programs that are run in them. These are the kinds of things that give all Orangeville residents a good quality of life. As we well know, facilities and programs and other services take serious money to run, as demonstrated by the recent numbers estimated to be spent on just Alder Street, Tony Rose, and the library. We also know that there is not a limitless supply of money, whether it's within our own families or in the town's budget. Dollars must be spent carefully, and where we can save dollars, we must. The financial advantages of choosing the OPP are now evident under the town's careful review of the policing situation. Making a decision in favor of the OPP will not only give us a good level of professional policing, but will also allow the town to maintain and perhaps expand on other services and programs that would benefit all town residents. Thank you for your consideration.
Thank you, Mrs. Ramsey. Yes, ma'am.
Ann Torrey, Town of Orangeville. I just wanted to bring a few quick points. First of all, a few council members have asked me, so I just want to state my grandson Connor, who presented that petition to you earlier this evening, he himself, well, with me at his side, went out and got at least a third to a half of the signatures on that petition going door to door. That's how heartfelt this whole issue is to a 12-year-old. Unfortunately, I had a pinch sciatic for 2 months, and weather conditions, we didn't get out anywhere near as far as he wanted to go, but I just wanted to point that out to you, that this was a 12-year-old's doing. Second of all, I just wanted to state, as been stated earlier, if council does decide to go OPP and it is discovered that that was the wrong move, there is no going back. The cost is going to be too extraordinary. Thirdly, shortly after the budget process for last year, somebody came to council looking for funding from council, and I won't say which council member, but one of the councillors here said, it's not always about the money, it's about what's best for the people. That's something else you need to keep in mind when making your decision. And the fourth thing I wanted to touch on was your mayor, or the mayor, in the article that came out in the newspaper recently about you, it stated that you felt there was a double standard because there are officers that want to go OPP but are afraid to speak out. I myself am wondering, I've talked to a few people who are in agreement, if they want to go OPP so badly, what's stopping them from putting in their application and going? Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Nick Gristo, L9W5V1, Orangeville, Ontario. Well, I want to say a few comments here tonight. As a member of the previous council that I sat on one of those chairs, I took the OPP and the ops very serious at that time. I'd done my homework. I voted according to my conscience. And at the end of it, when I explored everything, I made the decision, which was a 4-3 vote. And my vote was the one that kept Orangeville Police. I would ask you, council members, mayor, deputy mayor, be your own. Don't follow the leader. You have to be your own and vote it to your own conscience. That's what this all comes about. That is what the people put you there. That's why you are 7. Each one of you have to put your own vote according to your conscience, not according to what somebody else is going to tell you. I had a few that came to me the night of the voting. You got to vote for the OPP. My response to them, just to sit in the gallery and you'll hear my vote when the vote is taken. I can tell you one thing. I sat here on every meeting related to the ops and the OPP. I also have to challenge some of the numbers. I don't live by estimates. I live by facts and reality. I've been in this town in business for 48 years. I don't remember once that I did an estimate how to pay my employees when I had the big shop or how much money I needed. I knew with the reality, no estimates. I still operate that way. You can't do away of a 153-year-old police force in our town on estimates alone. When I asked staff, when I was sitting there, I said, are those $4.3 million that you guys stated, they are reality numbers or estimates? I was told they were estimates. And I said, do you want me to support, do away with my police force on an estimate? There's no way.
Mr. Grisso, if I could ask you to wrap up, sir.
Well, sir, I still have time. You gave ample time to others, so, sir, I will ask you, Mr. Mayor, every time I sit here, you cut me short.
Sir, you're at 4 minutes now, okay?
Did you time me?
Yeah, I do have the timer right here.
Isn't that interesting?
And there's a number of people behind you, sir, and
Well,
we've asked to wrap it up, so please, please
Mr.
make your
Mayor?
statement, sir.
I time you too, because 3 years is not a long time to go. I'll leave it to you at that.
Thank you, sir. All the best.
Hello again. I do have, sorry, I keep forgetting these things. I do have the actual bill for Muskoka that shows 13,700 calls for service, and how much, and that cost $5 million. But right now, I'd like to talk about the dedicated police officers that we may lose unless they are renegotiated again at the 4th year of the contract. And what I'm talking about is the dedicated officer we have for media and schools. So they deal with the media, they go around to schools, they do presentations, they do community presentations, they do a lot of activities. He does a lot of activities in the community. Then we have another dedicated officer that does beat patrol and then visits schools to work with students to do, to kind of build that community relationship with those police officers and get them to think safer, I guess, or more community oriented. Then we have a dedicated traffic officer. And last and definitely not least is a dedicated mental health officer that handles mental health in the community, that handles victim services. I think all those 4 or 5 I'm missing, they make the community, they help make the community what we are right now. We will not get that under the OPP unless we go and renegotiate that contract in the 4th year. Right now, we won't get them. So what is the cost in dollars that we will lose, and then what is the cost in community support services, in how they look at the police and how and all the factors, all the things that they do to support us. And I think that will be a big loss to lose those dedicated officers. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Council. I'm Tom Warren. I am 139 Church Street, but I also live in Burlington part-time too, and a couple other places around the world. I operate a few companies, and most of what I do is forensic investigations. I can tell you, with all due respect, I enjoyed the report. However, there's a lot of uncertainty and unknowns, and what I've heard a lot tonight of is cutting costs. But I'm not hearing a lot of talk on building revenue. And I think if you focus a lot more on that, a lot of these problems can go away. Right now, if we need the OPP, that service is free. They don't charge us back at this point in time. That may come one day, but right now it's free. If we go OPP, that free service is now gone. That's the added services we have to pay into. Patrols, and I don't know how much police service work your team has, patrols quickly turn into criminal events, and then those charges will be criminal. More times than not, when an officer does a patrol and pulls somebody over, it turns into more than just a pullover. It turns more than an HTA violation. When you have an asset, everyone, and we have to look at the Orangeville Police as an asset, and when you have rocky times coming down the path, and we see that through the what I saw the other night there as far as the economic growth in the town, the last thing you want to do is take a chance with your assets. The last thing you want to do is throw that asset out and maybe get a better idea, maybe get a better deal. In 4 years, we don't know. Respectfully to your report, we just don't know. We don't know who's going to be at the top of that food chain and make the change with the pen. Right now, we do know. Right now, we have that asset. And right now, we should be looking at more ways of making revenue in this town as opposed to tearing it down. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, members of council, and town staff, and of course the taxpayers of Orangeville. Tonight I'm going to make it short. I'm going to make it clear.
Your name for the record, sir?
Oh, Don Kidd,
Thank you.
55 Meadow Drive in Orangeville,
Thank you.
L9W 4C4. I've read the report from the consultant. I've read the CAO's report on the consultant's report on policing in Orangeville. And I've also got to say that I have, and I'll state it again, many times I've stated this, there's not a municipality whose borders touch the town of Orangeville which I don't have relatives and friends in. They are all policed by the OPP. Even senior staff live in areas that are policed by the OPP. There doesn't seem to be any fear. I hear no complaints from my relatives. I hear no complaints from my friends. Chief Kalinsky has done a good job, maybe too good a job. Maybe that's what makes this so difficult. If it had been a chief that maybe didn't put so much into his workday, it would have been easier for everyone. But it is what it is. The town of Keldon has 27 enhancements. My understanding, and it may have changed, is each enhancement is equal to the cost of a police officer. If we had 27 enhancements in Orangeville, we'd have a police officer in every corner. We also need to know that this is a difficult decision. I sat there, I know. But sometimes you have to look at the cost to the taxpayer. The same as if you go to buy a car, you have to look at the cost, or a house, or anything. As a taxpayer, I know how much I pay for taxes. I pay $6,300 and change a year for property taxes. To me, that's a lot of money for a house in Orangeville or anywhere else. Council has to look at, how do we cut the budget? You people have all been through a budget. You know how difficult it is. You have Mr. Jones. You have Ray Lemming, an old boss of mine down at work. But you have Parks and Rec. You have all these pressures on you Then you have the taxpayers saying, why am I paying so much? You'll never get another chance in your lifetime, maybe, as long as you sit in council, to make a cut like this. You are going to get the same officers that are presently employed by OPS who pass the qualifications to become an OPP officer. If they can't pass the qualifications to become an OPP officer, I would need somebody to explain to me why, as a taxpayer, I'm paying them to be an Orangeville Police Service officer. It seems to me that, come on, they will fill out their application, and I feel confident that they're going to get a position with the OPP. I also feel confident that some of our young officers in Orangeville who are very good at what they do, but they don't get a chance to advance. They're leaving. I have two friends I went to high school with, both their sons, police elsewhere. They won't come back here. There's no place for them to go.
Mr. Kidd, could I ask you to wrap up, sir,
I'm going to
in a
wrap
minute?
up.
Thank you.
I asked council to read the CAO's report. He highlights, along with the consultant, on what you will save. You're going to save $4 million a year. The former treasurer put those numbers out. The numbers are there. You're going to have the same number of officers or more, and you're going to save tax dollars. That's what you're here for, to try and cut that budget. $60 million. It's a lot of money for this town to raise for taxes, to cover a budget. It's maybe over $60 million now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
And enjoy your vote.
Thank you. How many folks we got there? Okay. All right, so, Mr. Chapman, you're the end of the line, sir. If somebody comes to stand, would you please tell them that they will not be speaking tonight? Okay, thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Alan Toms of 10 Sunset Drive, L9W2G9. Thank you for allowing me to speak here this evening regarding the policing in our fine town of Orangeville. Just a brief introduction on my part for the benefit of those that I haven't discussed this aspect of it before. But I've been around town a considerable amount of time since arriving in November 1951. For those interested in the math, that's about 68 years I've been around this town and seen a lot of changes. I must preface my comments this evening by saying that the residents of this town have been quite fortunate to have had some very fine police officers serving us over the years. Regardless of whether they are wearing an OPS or an OPP uniform, we should feel very confident that they will endeavor to provide us with the very same exemplary service. Having attended a number of policing sessions, both with the previous council and the current one, I've held back to observe and listen to various comments along with the recent consultant's report from Promax. The report was quite well done, utilizing both OPP and OPS data. The report confirmed that there was significant savings with the OPP, as indicated in the last financial analysis, even considering the transition and setup costs. I am somewhat disappointed at some of the expressed comments, such as the outstanding cost of the existing police building, which is required regardless of which police service occupies the facility. The interesting part is that the savings that would be recognized with the OPP would be greatly assist in paying the outstanding money still owed on the building. Response times repeatedly have been brought forward, but this appears to be nothing more than attempts to cloud the overall issue, as the town has been previously advised that should a decision be made for an OPP service, qualified OPS officers would operate in the same location as the current police service, and as such there would be no charge or change in the quality of service provided. There has been some concern about civilian staff that may be displaced if there is a change from OPS to OPP. Maybe utilizing existing dispatch equipment and some of the displaced personnel to fill this void should be a consideration rather than going to pay for another service outside our town. From the 2019 budget information included with our last property tax bill, you will have noticed that the Orangeville Police have been allocated 23% of the $35.6 million that makes up the town's portion of the property tax levy. This indicates a definite need for OPS to be more cost-effective and more cost-competitive with the OPP costs. The cost impact of our local police service has been an ongoing matter of discussion due to it being the largest service allocation, therefore plays a significant role in the cost of our property taxes, which have been reported as if not one, but maybe the highest in the GTA. Millions of dollars are at stake, and if, like the last council, decide to stay status quo with the OPS, the situation will get worse year after year, especially due to the cumulative effect. To stay status quo with OPS is, as they say, is a familiar definition, is to expect a different result by continuing to do the same things year after year. For example, if there is $4 million savings per year, then by year 10 it would be up to $40 million. That's approximately $5 million more than the town's portion of the tax levy in the 2019 budget. Residents in neighboring townships are paying less than half what Orangeville residents are paying for their
Mr.
OPP
Toms,
service.
if I could ask you to wrap up soon, please?
Yes,
Thank you.
very shortly. Residents in neighboring townships are paying less than half of the Orangeville residents are paying for the OPP service. Additionally, townships like Mono have been able to either freeze or control their property taxes during times when Orangeville residents are being asked for more. During recent council meetings, there have been discussions about dipping into reserve funds in order to pay for non-emergency projects. This is detrimental to the town of Orangeville finances and continues to add to tax burden to the residents. This, if not, is not found money when funds are taken from its reserves. It is hard-earned tax dollars put aside for emergency purposes. Just think about how much the savings is going to the OPP would assist us in this area. It's time to take the personal agendas out of the equation and do what is best for the town and the tax-paying residents. There is more than enough information to make an informed decision to confirm the transition to Ontario Provincial Police from Orangeville Police Service. In closing, I'd like to leave this council with a reminder that the majority of voters during the last election were asking you to take care of the matters like the policing and the property taxes that were not properly resolved by the last council. Thank you for your time and good luck moving forward.
Thank you, Mr. Toms.
Good evening. My name's Jennifer Beauregard. I live in Orangeville. I've been present for almost all of these processes, both the first time around and this last time. It's been brought up that this was presented as an electoral vision and something people were voting for. I have to say that I wasn't delivered that message at my door under the guise of fiscal responsibility. It was made very clear that the goal was to get rid of OPS. Transparency is a word that's been bandied about a lot in tonight's report, and I have to say that I do not feel that this has been a transparent or democratic process. It was both promised but also highlighted as an essential part of any costing by the visiting mayors, and this process is an erasure in that it has been pressured in a variety of places, from hostile treatment of people who appeared to be pro-OPS, anti-OPP, but rather this was supposed to be a democratic process to receive information and exchange information and opinion. Further to that, there were members in this process who should have demonstrated leadership and remained both open to varied opinions as well as keeping the impartiality necessary to maintain a democratic process. This did not happen. Whether it has The costing document, for example, to me represents erasure, the hiding of information. There were numbers that were shared that were numbers but didn't reflect the meaning of those numbers. I'm an educator and I teach children at a very young age to think critically, especially around data, because it can be manipulated easily to show you a certain thing that perhaps someone wants you to see. I can't help but feel that some of the measures that have been taken throughout this process have created a self-fulfilling prophecy rather than a democratic process. I listen to contradictions. I just heard one now where people are questioning whether we'll get the same level of service and why wouldn't we with the same people policing the streets. But the OPP in their sharing could not, in their mandate, guarantee that all officers would be hired. So that's a moot point, and I think we need to reflect on those contradictions. I feel that the base model is just that, a base model, and it is filled with hidden costs, and I appreciate the effort that you made in your description, in your report, because it is impossible to estimate and make predictions, and although we're not using the word prediction, it is a prediction because it's a best guess, it's an informed best guess, but it's still a best guess. I can't help but feel that I have privilege, we have privilege in being here this evening to have our voices heard, yet I can't help but feel that we're mortgaging my children's future in our decision-making. And I plead with you that you don't hasten a vote too quickly, that you take the time to find the exact Orangeville apples-to-apples comparison that we need to make a good informed choice, and that we don't proceed in ego, but rather inform common sense, and ensure that we actually take care of the children in this town and not the people who are actually paying the taxes at this moment. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you again. Noel Ramsey at 15 Feed Street. As the members of council are aware, I have been attending almost all the council meetings going back to last year's budget meeting, and I was extensively involved in questioning where a lot of the expenses showed up or looked very questionable. If you can recall one of them, I was wondering why we had to pay $400,000 for a new street sweeper. It seems like a large item. But I dug through all the numbers all the time. Then I started to focus on the police service budget because it made up 23%, because it was close to $10 million in cost. And then to get in additional information, I started attending the police services board meetings. And as Mr. Taylor, who's chair, can appreciate, I was there at the last one when they presented their 2020 budget for OPS services that was going to be considered the final. Initially, they considered it a draft, but at the end of the meeting, they decided it was going to be the final budget that they were going to send to the town. Now, in the budget highlights, there's a couple items that I wanted to point out. In the budget highlights, they said that they anticipated negotiating salary increases for 2020 for uniform and civilian collective agreements, impacting the budget. If I take a look at the budget, and you take a look at the compensation line, and the budget has been posted on the town's website already, the compensation line is going from $9,092,000 and change to $9,039,000. They're coming down $53,000. Now they articulate where they're coming down $53,000, where they're reducing headcounts. One of them is 4-class constable, court security check, communications officer, and relocation of a PSB secretary. That's on the police services board. But they're reducing staff salary by $53,000, and yet the budget is coming down by $53,000. They say that they're anticipating a salary increase. Now, I haven't spoke to anybody in the police association, but I would anticipate that somewhere in the 71 employees that are part of the civilian and the uniform members, that of those 71, some of them are going to get some kind of increase, not zero. Now, I sent this to, I did send you an email, Mr. Taylor. I can't explain it. And I don't know how, but it's just one example of an abnormality in the financial reporting that I've been seeing over time coming from the police services. Going back to September the 1st, when the police services did their presentation, they looked at on the presentation, they showed their revenue forecast. They showed all their revenue inputs, the grants, the police checks, the whole 9 yards. They also showed all their costs. And then they showed their net bottom line. And I was quite particular in that meeting that they needed a calculator because those items didn't add up. They couldn't add their revenue to their cost to come up with a correct net dollar value by a couple $100,000. The budget that was presented at the Police Services Board, the capital budget, and I'm holding it in front of me, shows that the capital expenditures forecasted for 2020 is $132,700, and that there's $134,000 in the reserve, and that all of that $133,000 expenditure was going to be taken from the reserve, leaving less than $2,000 in the reserve. Now, I will say that this is garbage, because they have obviously given something else to the town, because now it shows that they have a $195,000 capital budget for 2020. The interesting thing I find, and I really find this unacceptable, is that in their presentation to the public on September the 9th, they couldn't get their math right. If you take a look at the budget that was presented to you, Mr. Taylor, and to the rest of the Police Services Board, all of the capital expenditures adds up to $132,000. Somewhere in the Finance Department, they have corrected these spreadsheets to show that it's $195,000. It's a very simple spreadsheet. There are 4 items on it. If you take a look, their math on this spreadsheet missed adding up the top item of $62,000. So I am disappointed that the finances can't be managed within these departments. I'm also disappointed that within, as a taxpayer, within the town of Orangeville, are the spreadsheets, are the input from the different departments, and particularly—
Mr. Ramsey, if you can wrap up shortly, please. Thank you.
Particularly the police department, as well as the other departments, are those spreadsheets being validated? The operating spreadsheet is a very complex, and as the chief and others have indicated, that some of these lines, like maintenance repairs, in behind those lines, there's 21 other lines that make up that one-line summary in this very long summary report. Are the financial spreadsheets that are being provided from the police department being scrutinized to make sure that the math is correct? Simple math. I've seen it twice. And these are public presentations to the community, as well as what they are providing to the Police Services Board to present to the town. I'll end my comments by saying I hope that the Treasury Department and the town will take it more seriously to scrutinize the financial spreadsheets and the numbers provided by each department, but particularly what's coming in from the police department, because it is proven to be incorrect on at least 2 occasions that I could find as a simple taxpayer in this town. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. Okay, final public comment for today. Mr. Chapman.
I thank you for your patience, and I also thank you for giving me this extra time. What I'd like to talk about right now is the deployment of the OPP officers and response times. So I've been into the Orangeville Police Department a number of times, and I asked them to look at the board and see how many people are up there. And generally, there's 5 people on that board working that day. I listened very carefully to when the detachment commander for the OPP was here, and each time she was asked, it was either 2 people plus a sergeant or 3 people plus a sergeant.
Pardon me?
So either 2 people plus a sergeant.
Who said that?
The detachment commander, when she was asked at the presentation.
I'm afraid not, sir.
No,
she said
that's
6 constables and 1 sergeant, 24/7.
No, that's what
we'll have to go
be
back
here.
and look at the video, sir.
I absolutely will, because she said it was a two constables plus a sergeant, or 3 constables plus a sergeant.
That certainly was not the detachment commander who made that comment, sir.
Well, I will
have to correct.
I will review the thing, right?
We'll check the video.
The
Thank
thing
you.
is, Each of those OPP officers is covering either 288 square kilometers or 599 square kilometers. And she was also asked, the detachment commander was also asked about the closing
Oh, you're not
of
talking
satellite-
about Orangeville, you're talking about the rest of Dufferin County, I'm sorry.
Yes, exactly. No,
Okay,
no, exactly.
well, I'm sorry, you
Right.
didn't
So-
preface that.
No, well, and I apologize for that, because I went to OPS and asked them, then I listened very carefully to what the detachment commander said, and there were either 2 or 3 covering 599 square kilometers, 598 square kilometers, 280 square kilometers. Then she was asked by someone if they would close satellite branches, and her response was, "We may close Primrose and move everything into Orangeville," right?
I don't
After
believe she
that-
said close, I believe she said she would move the administrative headquarters and leave that as a satellite branch. That's what she said.
Okay, so then she said, then we're going to have 6 constables all the time, 24 hours a day. Well, the issue that I have that's in the that is that everybody's forgetting about the closest to the call aspect. Those are very large areas that the OPP is covering. When they are going to be part of the same unit, those officers that are here will be pulled all over the place depending upon who is closest to the call. So they may start off with all those officers, but if there's accidents on Highway 10, accidents on Highway 89, the OPS officers will be called to that, and we will be left with a lot less officers than our 6 that we're being told right now. And I think that we will lose coverage because the OPP will be, well, it's a benefit to the OPP because now they'll be covering all of Dufferin County, not just Orangeville. And I think that's another critical aspect in terms of response times. And thank you for your patience tonight. Appreciate it.
Okay. Let's have another 3 or 4 minute break here, and then we're going to have our treasurer provide a high-level budget presentation. We have Treasurer Nandini Syed, who's going to be providing a budget overview for us tonight. Madam Treasurer, over to you. Oh, sorry. Mr. Brennan's going to open up the discussion. I'm sorry, Mr. Brennan. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just want to make a couple comments before our Treasurer gives a high-level tabling of our 2020 budget. First of all, I just want to acknowledge the importance of our budget and the budget process. We've come up with a very detailed, it's 300-plus pages of a document. I think our budget, I would say, it's fiscally responsible, looking at the requirements that we're moving forward to, meeting the requirements of the levels of services that the Council has approved, and keeping within our strategic priorities in our strategic plan, Orangeville Forward. Before I pass it over to our Treasurer, I just want to say it was a team approach. I really appreciate all of the work that our team, our managers, supervisors, indeed our leadership team and the general managers, and particularly that of our finance department, of putting this all together. It's our Treasurer's first budget with us, and it's taken a lot of work. So with that said, great job to all. Over to you.
Thank you, Your Worship. To Your Worship, to Council, thank you for this opportunity to table 2020 budget for your review and consideration. I'll keep the presentation tonight very brief, as Council will have an opportunity to look at a much in-depth presentation of our budget on the 25th and 26th of November. As Mr. Brennan indicated, that the look and feel for this year's budget is very comprehensive. We are submitting a 300-plus pages worth of document. You have binders as well as you have this document online. This budget can be, in a nutshell, be described as a first step towards service-level-oriented budgeting, which is actually will become the norm for municipal budgeting vis-a-vis asset management regulations that are come up, which Mr. Brandon indicated earlier this evening. What to expect within the budget document itself. So the first three sections of the budget document, which starts with my message, and then the consolidated budget impact and the service level impact. So these three sections looks at 2020 budget from an aggregate, from a high level perspective. Then we move on to departmental overview of our budget, which kind of delves into a more detailed divisional level. Under each division, you will see service level matrices in terms of infographics. What we try to do is make our budget more accessible and provide our ratepayer as well as our council an overview of the service level that we're providing and some of our accomplishment from 2019. Further into the budget document, you will see budget highlights from different divisions, both on the operating side as well on the capital side. Capital projects details are provided for the year 2020 rather. Capital budget projection is for 10 years. As you can see, the document is already 300+ pages, so we decided to just provide capital project details for the year 2020. Then we move forward ahead in the budget document and look at financial outlook. Within that section, you will have a debt schedule analysis and a reserve schedule analysis that talks about our reserve level and our debt level and the correlation between the two. And the budget document appropriately wraps up with appreciation page. So before I get into the appreciation and thanking a few people who made this budget document a success, I just want to very briefly touch upon what the overall impact for 2020 is going to be. So we are looking at a 1.50% levy increase from 2019 to 2020 year, which equates to a little over $500,000. As council can see, and this table is, by the way, presented on page 3 of the overall document. As council can see on this particular table, the first row represents the 2019 multi-year levy requirement that was presented to council, and then the next row talks about 2020 multi-year levy requirement for the same years. The levy requirement represented on this table is net of real assessment growth. For 2020, that growth number is 1.35%. So I'm just going to leave it at that for today because more of this will be presented in 2 weeks. So before I wrap up, and just to echo Mr. Brennan's sentiment about this was truly a team approach, I just want to start with our senior leadership team, starting with Mr. Brennan. Thank you very much for your leadership and your support. Our team of 3 general managers, Ms. McKinney, Mr. Jones, and Mr. Osborne, thank you very, very much to offer your wisdom, your support, as well as your feedback throughout this process. Our entire global management team, as well as our communication team and finance team, who made this budget document a success. With that, I would close my remarks for tonight, and back to you, Your Worship.
Yes, I did, and thank you very much, Your Worship, and to Ms. Syed. I wanted to thank you and your team for this presentation at this point in the documentation. Having had the opportunity not only in my professional life, which is here with council, but also in my other professional life in education, in media, consultant, in the number of years I've been doing what I do, this is probably one of the best packages I have ever seen. The appreciation, I think, is yet to be announced by members of council, but the approach that you and your team have taken visually and from a documentation is going to help us out tremendously. I mean, the objective of all of us is to, in fact, take a look at this information and to ensure the taxpayers that we're going to try and do as much as we can without significant impact to them. As been echoed in previous discussions with members of our community, we have heard them loud and clear in different ways that they look at the impact of taxation in this community. And I think that this document, all 300 or close to 400 pages, we're going to be looking forward to digesting it over the next couple of weeks before we end up having the opportunity to respond in, I guess, November 25th and 26th, if I'm not mistaken. But again, thank you to everyone who's been involved with this so far. It may be premature, but it really is appreciated.
Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Any other comments from councillors? Councillor Taylor.
It was killing me not to say anything till this point in the evening, so there you go. I, too, am very impressed with the layout of this deck. As someone who spends a lot of time going through things like this, I appreciate when you get 439 pages that I can actually go through it in a very easy fashion. Love the pictures and looking forward to Michael Jordan. And when I see where we're starting off, it feels really good to know that we're starting at a level that feels like, oh, this is very workable. And it doesn't mean that we won't go through the details. We will. We'll do our due diligence. But from a start-off, jump-off point here, this is very exciting. So thank you very much.
Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Yes, thank you for the presentation. Just a quick question for you. How will the policing decision, will it impact this budget either way when the time comes? Are these figures going to change depending on what our decision is?
Through your worship to Deputy Mayor McIntosh, I'm not answering or taking any budget-related question tonight. But generally speaking, the budget approach or this particular document was put together with the caveat that our service level will continue as is. So I'll leave it at that for tonight.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Madam Treasurer. So moving on, see no new business. We have recommendation that the bylaws listed below be read 3 times and finally passed. A bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Orangeville's regular council meeting held on November 11th. May I have a motion? Councillor Sherwood, seconded by Councillor Post. All in favor? Okay, a motion to adjourn. Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Peters. All in favor? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.